Let me yank you right into the quiet before the storm. 7:45 a.m. on December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The sun's just spilling over the Ko'olau Mountains, painting the ocean in soft pink and gold, like someone dipped a brush in sunrise and swept it across the water. Most U.S. sailors here are still rubbing sleep out of their eyes. Some shuffle to the mess hall for lukewarm coffee and powdered eggs, others fold laundry on the decks of battleships, their hands moving slow in the humid air. A few guys even play catch on the beach, the ball thudding softly against their gloves, laughter mixing with the sound of waves lapping at the docks and seagulls squawking overhead. No one's worried. This is a Sunday, after all, God's day, not a day for war. The war's raging in Europe, sure, but that's an ocean away. Japan. Everyone thinks they're too busy bogged down in China to dare mess with the U.S. A seaman named John Brady, 19 years old, fresh from a farm in Iowa where he'd never seen the ocean till last month, polishes the brass railings of the USS Arizona till they shine like mirrors. He grins at his buddy Mike, who's leaning against a lifeboat, picking at a loose thread on his uniform. "Bet we'll get a day off this week," John says, tucking a crumpled photo of his mom and little sister into his pocket. He'd kissed it good morning, like he always did. Heard Waikiki Beach has palm trees so tall they block the sun. Wanna check it out? Mike snorts, tossing a candy bar wrapper into a trash can. "First, you gotta stop polishing that rail like it's your mom's good china. The captain's not gonna give you a medal for shiny metal, Brady." What John and Mike don't know. In 10 minutes, their world will blow up. 30,000 feet above them, a Japanese pilot named Lieutenant Mitsuo Fukuda adjusts his flight goggles, his hands steady on the controls of his Nakajima B-5N, Kate, torpedo bomber. He's leading 183 planes straight for the harbor, fighters with sharp, angular wings, bombers loaded with 500-pound explosives, torpedo planes with deadly warheads designed to slice through water and punch holes in ship hulls. Every plane has a bright red circle on its wings, the rising sun, Japan's battle flag. Fukuda's been training for this moment for 6 long months. Back in Japan, he'd flown over a full-scale mock-up of Pearl Harbor, built with wood and canvas, memorizing every ship's position, every dock, every airfield like it was his own backyard. He even practiced flying low, so low he could almost touch the treetops, because the U.S. had anti-aircraft guns that couldn't aim that close to the ground. His radio crackles to life, the voice of his wingman sharp and excited. "All units, prepare for attack. Targets in sight." Fukuda smiles, his jaw tight with focus. The Americans won't see this coming. Not a chance. To get why this is happening, why Japan would dare attack the most powerful nation in the world, you gotta go back a few years. By 1941, Japan's empire is like a starved dog. It's already grabbed parts of China, Korea, and Manchuria, but it needs one thing to keep growing: oil. Planes need oil to fly. Tanks need oil to roll. Ships need oil to sail. And most of the world's oil, controlled by the US and Britain. In 1940, Japan made a fatal mistake. It invaded French Indochina, now Vietnam, trying to grab its rubber and tin, and to get closer to the oil fields of the Dutch East Indies. The US hit back hard. President Roosevelt ordered a full embargo, no more oil sales to Japan. No more steel. No more scrap metal. It was a death sentence for Japan's war machine. Their oil reserves would run out in 18 months, tops. Japan's leaders panicked. They had 2 choices: back down, give up their dreams of a Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, fancy words for a Japanese empire, and pull out of China, or attack the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. If they could destroy America's big ships, especially the battleships and aircraft carriers, they figured the U.S. would get scared. They'd lift the oil ban. They'd let Japan have the Pacific. It was a crazy plan. Insane, even. But to Japan's military leaders, guys who'd grown up believing in the divine right of the emperor to rule, it was the only plan. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the man who dreamed up the attack, wasn't so sure. He'd lived in the US once, studied at Harvard, worked at the Japanese embassy in Washington. He knew how big America was, how much oil and steel it had, how many people. He warned his fellow generals, "I can run wild for 6 months to a year. After that, I have no expectation of success. We will awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." But the other generals didn't listen. They thought the US was soft, too busy worrying about Europe, too busy with its movie stars and baseball games to fight a two-ocean war. They thought Pearl Harbor was undefended. And they were right, sort of. The US had radar at Pearl Harbor, sure, but on Sundays, the operators worked half shifts, and most of them were new. At 7:02 a.m. that morning, 2 radar operators at Opana Point spotted a huge blip on their screen, 183 planes, flying straight for Hawaii. They called the info center, but a lieutenant there told them, "Don't worry about it. It's probably a group of B-17s coming in from the mainland." Oops. Most of the U.S. battleships were lined up in Battleship Row, a straight line in the shallow water of Ford Island, easy targets for torpedoes. The aircraft carriers, which were actually the most important ships, they could launch planes to attack enemy fleets, were out at sea, luckily for the U.S., delivering planes to other islands. But Japan didn't know that. They thought they were hitting the whole Pacific Fleet. On November 26, 1941, 6 Japanese aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, Zuikaku, sailed silently out of Hidokapu Bay in northern Japan, carrying 423 planes. They sailed 3,500 miles across the Pacific, staying far from shipping lanes, hiding in storms, turning off their radios so the U.S. couldn't track them. No one spotted them. Not a single U.S. spy plane, not a single fishing boat, not a single radar station. By December 6, they were 200 miles north of Hawaii, floating in the dark, waiting for dawn. Fukuda and his pilots gathered in the carrier's hangar, drinking hot tea, checking their gear. One pilot, a kid named Saburo Sakai, who'd later become a famous ace, wrote in his diary, "Tomorrow, we change history. The U.S. will remember this day forever. They will fear the rising sun." He was right. Just not in the way he thought. Back to 7:55 a.m. on December 7. John Brady's still polishing the Arizona's rail, his arm getting sore, when he hears a low, distant roar. At first, he thinks it's a group of U.S. planes, maybe the B-17s the guys were talking about. But then the roar gets louder, closer, till the whole air vibrates. He looks up, and freezes. A formation of planes is flying low, so low he can see the pilots' faces, the red circles on their wings. They're not U.S. planes. U.S. planes have white stars, not red circles. "Hey, Mike," he yells, his voice cracking. Are those Japanese planes?" Mike looks up, squinting. He laughs, shaking his head. "Nah, man. Must be the Army's new training planes. They do drills all the time, remember last week, they flew over at dawn. But then the first bomb hits. It slams into the USS Utah, a old battleship turned target ship, moored near Ford Island. The explosion is so loud it feels like the ground shakes. Water sprays 50 feet into the air, white foam mixing with black smoke. John is thrown backward onto the deck, his back slamming into a metal bulkhead. His ears ring so loud he can't hear anything, no more waves, no more seagulls, just a high-pitched whine in his head. He looks up, and the sky is full of Japanese planes. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Bombs are falling everywhere, whistling as they drop. Torpedoes slice through the water like silver knives, leaving white trails behind them. It's an attack, someone screams, maybe the chief petty officer, maybe a guy from the engine room. "Man your stations. Get to the guns." Chaos erupts. Sailors run for their battle stations, tripping over each other, yelling. John and Mike grab life jackets off a hook, fumbling with the buckles. But most of the anti-aircraft guns on the Arizona are locked up, keys are with officers who are off base, at church or at home with their families. A few guys manage to find keys, but by then, it's too late. A torpedo hits the Arizona's starboard side, right where the fuel tanks are. The ship shakes like a leaf in a storm. Oil sprays out of a broken pipe, thick and black, covering John from head to toe. He slips, almost falls, but Mike grabs his arm. "Come on!" Mike yells, pulling him toward the life rafts. "We gotta get off this thing." John runs, his boots slipping on the oily deck. But then he hears a sound worse than anything, a high-pitched whine, like a train coming off the tracks, getting louder and louder. He looks up. A 1,760-pound armor-piercing bomb is falling straight toward the Arizona's deck. It's so big, he can see the metal grooves on its side. It crashes through the deck, right into the forward ammunition magazine, where the ship stores its 16-inch shells and gunpowder. The explosion is so loud it can be heard 20 miles away, in Honolulu. Fire shoots 1,000 feet into the air, a pillar of orange and black that darkens the sky. The Arizona's bow lifts 20 feet out of the water, like the ship is rearing up, then slams back down with a crash that sends waves over the nearby ships. John is thrown into the ocean. The water is cold, oily, hard to breathe. He gasps for air, coughing up salt water and black slime. He looks around, panicking, trying to find Mike. He sees him floating nearby, his life jacket unbuckled, his face pale, his eyes closed. John swims over as fast as he can, his arms burning, and pulls Mike to a nearby life raft. He hauls him up, then slaps his face gently. "Wake up, Mike," he yells. "Come on, buddy. We're gonna get out of here." But Mike doesn't move. John puts his hand on Mike's neck, checking for a pulse. Nothing. He sits there, staring at his friend's face, the same face that laughed at his polishing, that talked about Waikiki Beach, while bombs keep falling around him, while other sailors scream and drown, while the Arizona sinks fast, her hull creaking like it's crying. This isn't a war, John thinks. This is a massacre. Up in the sky, Fukuda is elated. He circles the harbor in his bomber, his eyes scanning the chaos below. The Utah is sinking, her hull tilted so far that water covers her deck. The Oklahoma is tipping over, sailors clinging to her sides like ants, sliding into the water as she rolls. The Arizona is a ball of fire, black smoke billowing into the sky. His pilots are whooping over the radio, their voices excited. "I hit a battleship," one yells. "They're panicking. They can't stop us." Fukuda grins. He'd hoped for a success, but this is better than he imagined. At 8:54 a.m., he gives the order for the second wave, 170 more planes, mostly dive bombers and fighters, to finish the job. They target the dry docks, where U.S. ships are repaired, the airfields at Hickam Field and Wheeler Field, where U.S. planes are parked, the remaining ships that haven't been hit yet. At Hickam Field, 2nd Lieutenant Joe Foss, who'd later become a Medal of Honor winner and a famous Marine ace, runs toward his Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighter, his heart racing. He'd been eating breakfast in the mess hall when the first bombs hit, now, he just wants to get his plane in the air and fight back. But when he gets to the tarmac, he freezes. Most of the planes are on fire, their wings melted, their fuselages split open. A few are still intact, but the Japanese fighters are strafing the field, their machine guns tearing up the ground. He can't even get close. "Damn it," he yells, kicking a piece of debris. "We're sitting ducks." By 9:45 a.m., it's over. Fukuda orders his planes back to the carriers. He counts the losses, 29 planes shot down, 55 airmen dead or captured. That's nothing, he thinks. We did it. We destroyed the U.S. Pacific Fleet. But he's wrong. So wrong. The U.S. aircraft carriers, the Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, were all out at sea, delivering planes to Midway Island and Wake Island. The ships Japan needed to destroy the most, the ones that could launch planes to attack their carriers, were still intact. The U.S. submarine fleet, which would later sink hundreds of Japanese ships, was unscathed, hiding in the deep water outside the harbor. And Japan didn't even hit the oil storage tanks at Pearl Harbor, 4.5 million gallons of oil, enough to keep the U.S. Pacific Fleet running for 18 months, sitting in huge metal tanks near the shore, untouched. If they'd bombed those tanks, the U.S. would have had to sail all the way to California to refuel, buying Japan months of time. But they forgot. It's a fatal mistake. Yamamoto's warning echoes in Fukuda's head. We have awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. But Fukuda pushes it aside. Today, Japan won. That's all that matters. Back in Washington, D.C., it's 1:45 p.m., East Coast time. President Franklin D. Roosevelt is in his second-floor office in the White House, sitting at his desk, working on his stamp collection, one of his favorite ways to relax, when his secretary, Grace Tully, bursts in, her face white, her hands shaking. "Mr. President," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "Pearl Harbor is under attack. It's the Japanese. The Navy just called." Roosevelt stops what he's doing. He sets down his tweezers and the stamp he'd been holding, then sits back in his wheelchair, his face serious. He's been warning Congress for months that Japan might attack, telling them to build more ships, more planes, to get ready, but no one wanted to believe him. Now, it's real. He picks up the phone and dials the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson. "Henry," he says, his voice steady. "Pearl Harbor's under attack. Get the Joint Chiefs together. We need to meet. Now." Then he calls his wife, Eleanor. "My dear," he says, softer now. "There's been an attack. We're going to have to go to war." The next day, December 8, Roosevelt puts on a dark blue suit, a white shirt, and a red tie, his war suit, as Eleanor called it. He wheels himself into the House of Representatives, where every seat is filled, every eye is on him. Members of Congress stand and clap as he passes, their faces a mix of anger and sorrow. He sits at a small desk at the front of the room, takes a deep breath, and begins to speak. His voice is steady, but you can hear the fire in it, the anger at the sneak attack, the sorrow for the lives lost, the resolve to fight back. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. The room erupts in cheers. Members of Congress stand, yelling, "Amen," and "Let's go." When the vote to declare war on Japan comes, it's 388 to 1 in the House, 82 to 0 in the Senate. The only no vote. Representative Jeanette Rankin, a pacifist from Montana who'd also voted against U.S. entry into World War I. After the vote, she receives death threats. She has to be escorted out of the capital by police. 3 days later, Germany and Italy, Japan's allies in the Axis powers, declare war on the U.S. Now, America is in World War II, all in. And Japan? They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Let's talk numbers, because they tell the horror of that day, even if they can't tell the whole story. 2,403 Americans died that day, 2,008 sailors, 218 soldiers, 109 Marines, and 68 civilians, most of them in Honolulu, hit by stray bombs. 1,178 Americans were wounded, some lost arms or legs, some were burned so badly they could barely be recognized, some would never walk again. 8 U.S. battleships were damaged or sunk, the Arizona, sunk, 1,177 dead, the Oklahoma, capsized, 429 dead, the California, sunk, 100 dead, the West Virginia, capsized, 106 dead, the Nevada, beached to avoid sinking, 50 dead, the Pennsylvania, damaged, 9 dead, the Tennessee, damaged, 5 dead, the Maryland, damaged, 4 dead. 188 U.S. planes were destroyed, most of them on the ground, still in their hangars or parked on tarmacs. 155 more were damaged. Japan lost 29 planes, 5 midget submarines, which tried to sneak into the harbor but were sunk, and 65 men. But numbers don't tell you about the sailors trapped in the Oklahoma's hull, tapping on the metal with their knives, begging for help, until the air ran out 16 days later. They don't tell you about the nurses at Tripler Army Medical Center, working for 36 hours straight, their uniforms soaked in blood, their hands shaking, trying to save men who were burned or shot or drowning. They don't tell you about John Brady, sitting on that life raft, watching his friend's body float away, wondering if he'll ever see his mom and sister again. What the numbers do tell you is this: Japan won the battle, but they lost the war. The US had the biggest industrial machine in the world, and once it got revved up, it was unstoppable. By 1942, US factories were building 10 aircraft carriers a year, Japan built just 6 the entire war. By 1943, the US was making 8,000 planes a month, Japan made 4,000 that whole year. The US had oil, lots of it, from Texas and California. Japan had to steal it from the Dutch East Indies, and US submarines sank most of their oil tankers. The US had people, too. 16 million Americans would serve in World War II, from 18-year-old farm boys like John Brady to 40-year-old fathers. Women joined the workforce, too. Rosie the Riveter became a symbol of the millions of women who built planes, tanks, and ships in factories while the men fought. At Ford's Willow Run plant in Michigan, workers built a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes, something Japan could never dream of. 6 months later, in June 1942, the U.S. Navy got its revenge at the Battle of Midway. Using the same aircraft carriers Japan missed at Pearl Harbor, U.S. pilots sank 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, the same ones that launched the Pearl Harbor attack. It was the turning point of the Pacific War. After Midway, Japan was on the run. By 1945, U.S. bombers were hitting Tokyo and other Japanese cities every day. Japan was out of oil, out of planes, out of food. On August 6, 1945, the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another on Nagasaki. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender over the radio, the first time most Japanese had ever heard his voice. The war was over. And it all started with that day at Pearl Harbor, the day Japan woke up the sleeping giant. Today, Pearl Harbor is a memorial, a place to remember, to honor, to never forget. The USS Arizona still lies under 40 feet of water, her hull rusted but still intact. In 1962, a white concrete memorial was built over her, spanning her sunken decks. It's a simple structure, no statues, no flags, just a long, low building with windows that look down at the water. 1,177 sailors are still on board the Arizona, they're buried there, forever. Every year, on December 7th, people gather at the memorial, veterans in wheelchairs, their medals shining, families of the dead, holding photos of their fathers or grandfathers, kids from local schools, wearing poppies, listening to stories. They throw flower wreaths into the water, and you can still see oil bubbles rising to the surface, the tears of the Arizona, people call them. The oil still leaks from the ship's tanks, a slow, quiet reminder of that terrible day. John Brady survived the war. He fought at Midway, at Guadalcanal, at Iwo Jima, where he was shot in the leg and awarded a Purple Heart. After the war, he went back to Iowa, married his high school sweetheart, Mary, and had 3 kids. He never talked much about Pearl Harbor, never mentioned Mike, never mentioned the Arizona, until he was 80 years old, in 2002. That year, his son took him to the Pearl Harbor Memorial. John wheeled himself to the window overlooking the Arizona, and he stood there for a long time, staring at the water. Then he pulled the crumpled photo of his mom and sister out of his pocket, the same one he'd carried on the Arizona, and he cried. I lost a lot of good friends that day, he said, his voice shaking. But we fought back. We won. That's what matters. Mitsuo Fukuda, the Japanese pilot who led the Pearl Harbor attack, spent the rest of his life regretting it. After the war, he became a Christian and traveled the world, talking about peace, about the horror of war. In 1960, he met John Brady at a veterans conference in Hawaii. They shook hands. Fukuda looked at John, his eyes sad. "I am sorry for what I did," he said. "I never meant to start a war that would kill so many people, so many young men like you and your friend." John nodded. He didn't say much, just, "I forgive you." But we can never forget. The legacy of Pearl Harbor isn't about destruction. It's not about hate. It's about resilience, it's about what happens when a nation is attacked, not just physically, but morally. On December 7, 1941, America was hurt. We were angry. We were scared. But we didn't break. We came together. Soldiers volunteered by the thousands, lining up at recruitment offices before the sun came up. Factory workers stayed late, working 12-hour shifts, building planes and tanks. Kids collected scrap metal from their yards, saving it to make bullets. Even Hollywood did its part. Movies like From Here to Eternity and Pearl Harbor told the story, keeping the memory alive for generations. Pearl Harbor teaches us two things, above all: first, never underestimate your enemy. Japan thought the US was soft, that we'd give up easily. They were wrong. Second, never underestimate the strength of a nation when it stands together. America wasn't perfect in 1941, we had segregation, black sailors were assigned to menial jobs, not combat, we had inequality, but in World War II, we put those differences aside. We fought for something bigger than ourselves, freedom. Every year, on December 7th, we say, "Remember Pearl Harbor." It's not just a slogan. It's a promise. A promise to remember the 2,403 lives lost that day. A promise to never let a sneak attack like that happen again. A promise to honor the courage of the men and women who fought back, who turned a defeat into a victory. The sun still rises over Pearl Harbor every morning. The ocean is still calm, the waves still lap at the docks. But if you listen closely, if you stand by the Arizona Memorial, if you feel the breeze on your face, if you look down at the oil bubbles rising from the water, you can still hear it, the roar of Japanese planes, the explosion of the Arizona, the screams of sailors, the cheers of those who fought back. You can still remember. And that's how we keep their legacy alive.